Number 17, Louisville 2024 preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 67 of Good Morning College Football from campus2canton.com. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much for liking this video, helping us prepare for the 2024 college football season, which is just 43 days away from kickoff as we record here on Friday morning, July 12th. And of course, thank you to those of you who have become members at campus2canton.com, where you can join for as little as $2.99 per month. You get tons of great content for signing up at that level, includes written content. I've learned a lot in the last week or so about CFF, College Fantasy Football, best ball draft strategy from Chris K. He put out a couple of pieces on that. So looking forward to implementing some of his advice very soon. But there's tons of great stuff, all kinds of analysis for college fantasy football, Devi, for the Campus to Canton version of the game, of course, and which includes both the college and NFL side of your fantasy football teams. But of course, also the CFF guide is now available from a lot of those great writers and contributors for campus2canton.com. Folks like Chris K. and Nate Marquise, Jared Palmgren, Justice, Chris Moxley, Ethan Sowers have combined to put together the best version of the CFF guide yet at Campus to Canton. You can access it as an annual NIL member. That's part of that subscription package, but also for others who maybe haven't made the jump quite yet to that level, it's available for $20. But you get full breakdowns of all 134 teams, more than 200 individual player profiles. They include CFB Winning Edge stat projections, which got a little bit of an early peek at many of those through the CFF guide, but for our all 22 and C2C Winning Edge tier members, those stat projections should be available to you by the end of the day today, Friday, July 12th. So finishing up a few final pieces, trying to go through and make sure everything is fully up to date and ready to go. But those email invites should be out very soon today, once we get done with our Louisville 2024 preview. And on that note, Louisville is a team that we are a bit higher on than just about anyone else, it seems. You know, in these previews that we've done, 16 of them leading up to our preview of the cards today, you know, we've discussed a lot of the other ranking systems out there, whether they are computer-based analytics ratings systems, or whether they are more of the traditional media outlet polls or individual analysts analyzing and predicting order of finish. Most everybody, or actually everybody that we have referenced throughout this series, seems to be at least a little bit lower on Louisville than our CFB Winning Edge team strength power ratings are. Stuart Mandel of The Athletic is on the high side at number 18 in his post-spring portal rankings. But Mandel actually dropped Louisville from number 11 in his previous version of those rankings. Part of that due to some of the turnover in the transfer portal, few fairly high-profile Louisville incoming transfers who spent the spring with the Cards. Penny Boone, a running back who had transferred in from Toledo. He has since ended up at UCF. Tyler Barron, very productive pass rusher, defensive lineman, edge defender, transferred to Louisville from Tennessee, but then made another move, ended up at Miami. So some of those, key pieces or projected to be, expected to be key pieces for Louisville. We had Boone and Barron both expected to start in our team profiles projected depth charts, which we'll go over the most up-to-date version of shortly. But it's understandable, I think, to say that this roster was completely rebuilt, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And a couple of the pieces that were very important to a lot of, or at least one projected starter on each side of the ball, moving on, not making it to the season. It's understandable that Louisville would drop a little bit in the eyes of some. So Stuart Mandel still on the high side, but did downgrade his Louisville ranking after the spring. The Cards are 20th in the Sporting News rankings, preseason rankings. They are 21st in ESPN's Football Power Index. Also, Kelly Ford and the K Ford ratings have Louisville at number 21 as well. Louisville's number 22 in the EA Sports College Football 25 power rankings, and that game is going to be out, any day now, right? So Louisville expected to be a top 25 program at the beginning of your college football 25 dynasty. The preseason magazine King, Phill Steele, has Louisville number 23 in his preseason power poll, which is the more computer-based system, putting a number on who would be favored over who in a neutral field matchup. Louisville, a top 25 team in that way of doing it, but Phill Steele also does a more of the traditional magazine predicted order of finish, which has Louisville 32nd in those rankings. Athlon Sports preseason magazine has the Cards at number 24. Beta Rank, also the computer analytics based system, sees Louisville as a top 25 team as well. A few don't have the Cards in the top 25. ESPN's SP Plus has the Cardinals at number 28. And then not a number attached, but analyst Andy Staples at On 3 included Louisville in his just missed section in his most recent preseason top 25 predictions. And then Mark Schleybaugh of ESPN, like Stuart Mandel, dropped the Cards. They were a top 25 team in a previous version, but had dropped out by the post-spring edition. So at number 17, CFP Winning Edge and our team strength power ratings are definitely on the higher side. And, I think a reason for that is our player by play, building our ratings, our team ratings at the very beginning based on individual players. And it's difficult to look at a team like Louisville by sort of taking a step back and saying, man, this team is so different. How could they possibly, gel together in time? How could Louisville possibly fill all of its, roster questions via the transfer portal the way that they, have attempted to? How could that possibly work out? Really, honestly, it did last season, and our numbers were, I don't have the exact rundown in front of me on how we compared to all of these others that we reference here on the previews. But if memory serves me correctly, we were a little high on Louisville as well. And the Cards were sort of a trendy pick to make it to the ACC Championship Game. Of course, they did. And we're able to navigate a fairly manageable schedule to do that. Some things have changed. The schedule is a little on the more difficult side as far as ACC teams go. We dig into that a little bit on the CFB Winning Edge podcast, our ACC preview, which we broke into two parts of the last few weeks. Part 2 includes Louisville, includes the teams in the top half of our ACC power rankings. Of course, the Cards are 5th, but very much within striking distance. But a lot of the teams in that top half have strength of schedule rankings, in the 40s, sometimes the 50s or 60s. There are a couple of teams that really do seem to have gotten a very favorable draw as far as conference opponents in this new setup. But Louisville's more on the high side, close to a top 25 strength of schedule, which of course we'll get into a little bit later. But so it's understandable, I think, from the outside looking in, if you're not drilling down on the player by player level and saying there's just going to be too much turnover. And a lot of computer, analytics based systems rely, a little bit more than we do on past performance. That is certainly a factor for us. And Jeff Brohm, as a head coach, has done a good job in the past. He's fringe top 25 head coach. You could argue, maybe he's worthy of a higher ranking, but the way we do that is statistically based. Our team performance ratings based specifically on head coach history. Brohm comes in at number 26 for us right now. But last season, Louisville played like a top 15 team. Let's take a look at our our CFP Winning Edge team profiles to show you what we are talking about here. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, I'll zoom in a bit. Team performance for last season overall, Louisville ranked 11th nationally, so almost like a top 10 team. Do keep in mind our team performance numbers, like all the stats posted here, come from the regular season only and against FBS opponents only. So Louisville did sort of struggle a bit at the end of last season, probably would have dropped from that number 11 team performance rating if we did include the bowl game, if we did include the ACC Championship game. But it's just better for us on the whole as far as trying to account for all 134 teams that we end up dropping those postseason games. But nearly a top 25 offense, 26th overall on offense, 21st passing, 31st rushing, 16th in defensive team performance. So that Louisville defense, somewhat surprisingly, if you think of Jeff Brohm's background for a Brohm-led team, where we think, especially college fantasy football focused people are well versed in Brohm's ability to build a very productive offense and lean into the strengths on the roster, which he had to do kind of a cross on both sides of the ball last season at Louisville. On the offensive side of the ball, ran it a bit more than we were used to, but then defensively really kind of leaned on that unit last season a bit more than sometimes we've seen Brohm do in the past. But solid on both sides of the ball. Passing defense 27th, rushing against the run 20th as well. How did it go week by week? Louisville, mentioned won 10 games, started 10-1, struggled a bit down the stretch, lost the regular season finale to in-state rival Kentucky in a game in which the Cards had a 65% post-game win expectancy, according to collegefootballdata.com. So if you were to look at their advanced box scores, which we refer to for those post-game win expectancy numbers, you had the same box score. If that game had been played 100 times, 1,000 times, you would expect Louisville to have won that nearly 2/3 of the time. So I think that the Cards actually outplayed Kentucky, but came up on the wrong end of that final score. The final two games against Florida State, a Florida State team that was without its starting quarterback, could not quite get going on offense. That FSU defense, very, very impressive, and Louisville struggled to rise to the opportunity there to win the ACC. And then against USC in the bowl game, Louisville defensively took a step back, allowed 42 points to Miller Moss and the Trojans there. So kind of limped to the finish, but overall it was a very, very successful season for the Cards. Look at those post-game win expectancy numbers. There were 2 potential toss-ups, maybe against teams that you would have expected Louisville to, be clearly better than. 57% in the opener against Georgia Tech, 58% against Virginia, but some other very impressive performances. 98% post-game win expectancy against Notre Dame, coming after a solid 84% in a close, low-scoring game against NC State. Also 98% against Miami later in the season, that 10th win. So this Louisville team earned its final record with 9.78 second-order wins, adding up all those post-game win expectancy numbers, see how that compares to what the actual results were on the field, and they pretty much came in line. But that was a manageable schedule. There were certainly tough matchups, tough opponents along the way, but it did, rank a little on the lower side as far as strength of schedule goes. And there was a path to the ACC Championship game that Louisville was able to navigate and get there. So how will it shake out this year? We will certainly dig into that, but stats wise, a lot of these numbers go into those team performance numbers, but very, very solid in a lot of categories. Top 25 in scoring margin. Again, FBS opponents only in the regular season only. Net yards per play, just outside the top 25 there, 27th overall. Top 20 in net points per drive, coming from Brian Fremeau and bcftoys.com. Personal favorite stat of mine. I think net points per drive is a really, really good indicator of how well a team is played overall. Net yards per pass attempt, a little bit lower because defensively that was an area where Louisville struggled a bit, allowed big plays through the air at a bit of a higher rate, but success rate much, much better. 16th defensively in success rate, top 10 on offense. So net success rate at 6th nationally. That was an area the Cards really, really excelled last season. And then top 15 nationally in, we have it labeled here, EPA margin. We use an equivalent from collegefootballdata.com, PPA. And Louisville was 14th nationally in that category. So overall, very, very solid across the board. 10-win team that absolutely earned those 10 wins, but a lot of turnover from last season. So how does it look as far as returning production goes? Let me get to the right page here in our returning production database from CFP Winning Edge and campus2canton.com, where you can get access to this sheet as well as all 134 FBS teams, both the team profiles and team performance. See here that Louisville ranks 69th overall in returning production. That number is adjusted for incoming transfers. If you're looking for just raw returning production, you can find that in this area here, where Louisville would have ranked 103rd if we were only looking at who's coming back and who's not from last season's rosters across the country. Louisville had turnover in the triple digits, just 41.7%. Offensively, that number was all the way down at 120th in raw offensive returning production. On the defensive side of the ball, a little bit better, top 50 nationally. But you can see the Cards were very aggressive in the transfer portal on both sides of the ball, able to improve those numbers significantly, even though offensively, adjusted offensive returning production includes those incoming transfers, still in the triple digits, but nearly 20 spots higher in the rankings. Defensively, returning production adjusted for those incoming transfers, 26th nationally, which again comes out to not the highest, a little bit more in the middle of the pack nationally, 12th in the ACC, which now has 17 teams. Hard to keep up, but overall, because of the aggressiveness of Jeff Brohm and his coaching staff and the work that they were able to do, bringing players in, even those that, ended up not sticking, which, these numbers don't include Penny Boone anymore, don't include Tyra Barron. We adjust them as far as quickly as we can based on news when it happens. But Louisville in a much, much better spot than it could have been potentially. This number also maybe underrates the impact of Tyler Shuck, who is, if not officially the starting quarterback, it sure sounds like, he's being treated that way. Some of the press conference quotes coming out from, I believe it was Monday, Jeff Brohm had a press conference. There were some discussions about, quarterback depth and who, would be the next QB up behind Shuck, because Tyler Shuck, I've been a fan. I've enjoyed watching him play. The problem is he's been unavailable for chunks of the last couple of seasons. Played just 4 games last season for Texas Tech. The numbers weren't spectacular. 6.7 yards per pass attempt is definitely an area where you hope he'll be able to improve, but can run it a little bit, as you can see here. 149 yards on the ground in 4 games, 48 attempts, 2 touchdowns. Adds a little bit more athleticism, I think, at the quarterback position than Jack Palmer offered last season. Palmer wasn't a statue, but Shuck can actually be a productive runner. The problem is you probably don't want him to take too many carries, because he has taken some big hits and ended up sidelined for a little while. But Plummer was solid last season. Over 3,200 passing yards, 21 touchdowns. You would like to see a few less interceptions. 12 picks last season for Plummer. 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Decent, but I think the potential is there for Louisville. That again was a topic of discussion this week in Jeff Brohm's press conference, trying to create more big plays, more vertical passing opportunities for this offense. Probably not going to run quite as much, not going to lean on the running back position, which Jawar Jordan and Isaac Garindo, both double-digit touchdowns, both average more than 6 yards per attempt. Excellent seasons last year, came up just short of 2,000 yards combined. And I believe Louisville, the only program to have 2 running backs drafted in this most recent NFL draft. So those are certainly big losses. And behind, coming in behind, you've got Maurice Turner, who we don't have projected. You probably saw don't have projected as number 1 running back. I do believe Phill Steele does, but we've penciled in Donald Chaney Jr., the transfer coming in from Miami. Some other, Louisville beat reporters and folks that follow the program seem to be on the side of Chaney as well, but could be a fairly even workload between the two. It worked out pretty well for Jordan and Garindo last season, but Kewan Brown, somebody who had a great spring, according to reports. I believe the running back coach even singled Brown out as the most impressive this spring. So could he emerge as one of those top 2 options? Will it be a 3 running back committee situation potentially? But having to replace those 2 very productive runners is a little bit of a question mark, and there's no clear, number 1 guy who's going to come in and carry a very heavy workload like it looked perhaps Penny Boone and his 240 pounds might have been more, in line for that kind of workload if that was the route that they were going to go. But we'll see how that shakes out, of course. But the receiving core, and again, trying to create more explosive plays through the air is going to be key. Replacing Jamari Thrash, the transfer from Georgia State, who got off to a huge start last season, tailed off a little bit, but guy who was targeted nearly 100 times, 63 catches, 858 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Chris Bell is the leading returning receiver from last season. There's a lot of optimism for him to perhaps be that top target this year. I know early in the preseason, the South Alabama transfer, Colin Lacey, who had great numbers. I mean, just huge levels of production for the Jags last season, as you see here. 119 targets, 91 catches, 1,316 yards, and 7 touchdowns. A lot of CFF folks expecting him to just step in and be that top wide receiver for South Alabama, but there's a little bit of little less confidence, we'll say, as the offseason has gone on, that Lacey would actually be able to step in and put up those types of numbers. Not expecting him to put up the numbers he had at South Alabama, but maybe more in line of what Thrash did last season. But I mentioned that best ball piece that Chris K wrote for CampusToCanton.com, and he highlights Chris Bell. I've seen some others close to the Louisville program write about Bell and his breakout potential at an even larger scale than last season, where he was productive. 29 catches, 407 yards, 2 touchdowns, but maybe in line for real wide receiver 1 type targets this year. Jimmy Callaway seems to be that third wide receiver in most projected depth charts that we've seen. So our numbers, our team profile and depth chart projections will reflect that. But there are some really interesting players coming in through the transfer portal. Not only Lacey, but Ja'Cory Brooks, who at one point looked like maybe a future star wide receiver at Alabama. Hopefully he'll be able to recapture some of that for Louisville. The tight end position was one in which the Cards hit really hard. Tight end has been a very productive position for Brohm in the past. Last year's group was not very productive. Nate Kariski, 23 targets, 18 catches, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not nothing, but this is a position, at Purdue and elsewhere that Brohm seemed to really find productive members of and pass catchers, most importantly, guys who could produce, statistically speaking, at the tight end position. So Mark Redmond maybe has the inside track to being that type of player. Jaleel Skinner is one who I think has a high ceiling. There's a lot of excitement about the returning tight end, Jamari Johnson, who got some action, played 5 games, 7.1 snaps, 7.1 percent of the team snaps, about 13 and a half snaps per game in his 5 appearances. A lot of belief that perhaps he's going to be able to step up and put up some numbers this year when given the opportunity. And then kind of a interesting newcomer to me, a transfer from Kentucky, is sort of a wide receiver tight end hybrid, Isaiah Cummings. Interested to see what he could do as well. The offensive line loses 3 full-time starters, but brings in 4 players who have double-digit starts or did last season, as well as the return of Michael Gonzalez. Austin Collins and Renato Brown, kind of co-starters last season at right guard. Brown went down due to injury. Him returning is more like 2 returning starters and then filling in the rest via the transfer portal. Defensively, not quite as much expected as far as first-year incoming transfers, but a lot of players are new on the defensive side of the ball, as you can see here in blue. Dan Foster Jr., linebacker transfer from Texas State. Several players in the secondary expected to come in and provide some experience transferring in the defensive line as well. So there's a lot of turnover, maybe not quite as much on the offensive side of the ball, because you do get your top 2 tacklers returning in TJ Quinn, Devin Neal. 2 other players in the secondary, Benjamin Perry, Quincy Riley, who played quite a bit last season. Ashton Galat at the defensive line is coming back. Productive player in Mason Rieger is back as well, sort of a defensive end linebacker hybrid, that Leo position at Louisville. So a little bit more returning there for the Cards on defense. So We looked at the returning production. My banners work not great today. Sorry about that. So what does it look like depth chart wise? Got a little bit of a preview of it when we were talking stats, but we've got Tyler Shuck transferred in. I misspoke earlier. We do have Ja'Cory Brooks listed as a starter at wide receiver. Jimmy Callaway is, I believe, in some other outlets, maybe ahead of Brooks in the pecking order. So we're definitely going to keep an eye on reports coming out of fall camp, and we'll make that change if need be. But Brooks ranks a little higher, as does Donald Chaney Jr., which we've given the nod over Maurice Turner. As mentioned, not everybody agrees with that. And so we will, of course, make changes there if need be as well. But there are options to work with. There are players who have the potential to step up, play a bigger role, like Chris Bell. And, Jeff Brohm did a really, really good job incorporating first-year transfers last season, getting that roster up to a point where it was able to win 10 games, compete for the ACC Championship. The offensive line, as we said, put Renato Brown back in the starting lineup. Him back and fully healthy will be a key piece to that, but likely both starting tackles and center will be first-year transfers for Louisville. Defensively, getting Jalop back, and my apologies if I mispronounce his name or anyone else's, not intentional, but that middle part of the defensive line could certainly include multiple transfers playing significant snaps. Thor Griffith, the transfer from Harvard, he was a member of Bruce Feldman's Freaks list last season, and somebody who put up big numbers in the Ivy League. Interested to see what he can do as a player in his first season in a Power 4 conference. 320 pounds, really athletic. A player to watch if you didn't know that name already. Miles Jernigan, I just put him in the starting lineup today, made that move because multiple sources that I checked back up on have him listed as a starter there. So another potential first-year starter going to be playing a significant role in that front seven. The two starting linebackers are maybe not set in stone. We have Dan Foster Jr. there. TJ Quinn returning as a starter, you would expect will be, but there's going to be some competition there as well. And the secondary is experienced as far as returning starters go, with Neil, Perry, and Riley all back. But there seems to be, if there's a question mark defensively for Louisville, it seems to be in the secondary, based on those who follow this program very closely. Getting MJ Griffin back after missing all of last season could be key to depth in the secondary, as is the addition of 5 players in the 2 deep for us as far as first-year transfers. So this Louisville offense and defense is maybe a little difficult to project because there are so many moving pieces, but on the other hand, a lot of options for Jeff Brohm, kind of the anti-Clemson in some ways. I think I made that comparison on the CFP Winning Edge podcast, where Clemson recruits as well as it does, and tries to develop those players. Doesn't go into the transfer portal for a quick fix, and perhaps that's going to work out. Perhaps it's going to lead to some depth issues, and the margin for error is relatively low, because if you don't hit on those high school recruits, you could be in big trouble. Louisville, hey, we had some guys leave. We need to bring in players who are ready to compete immediately. And if they fit in, win a starting job, great. If they don't, then maybe they add some depth. But very, interesting to see those two teams, and they rank quite similarly in our power rankings, and they're two different, quite opposed ways of roster building, roster management. So let's take a look at the schedule. How does it all shake out? As I mentioned, the strength of schedule, a little bit more difficult for the Cards this year. Last season, it was on the low end as far as ACC strength of schedule goes. This year, 26th, definitely on the high side. Our projected win total is 7.89. That does come in slightly under the 8.5 that the Cards are picked in the DraftKings regular season win totals this year. But the Cards are favored in 9 games according to our projections. And so if we adjust this number, which this is our traditional way of projecting those win totals, you look at those projected win percentages based on our projected point spreads, add all of those up by giving 0.94 wins for that Austin Peay week 1 matchup, 0.89 for the Jacksonville State, 0.75. Get to the end, we're at 7.89 because there are some toss-ups, just 51% against Miami, 53% against SMU, who, of course, we are also higher on the Mustangs than just about anybody else out there. There are games in which the Cards are underdogs, but very close as well. Kentucky, 47%, Clemson, 42%. So a lot of these matchups could go either way, and that just didn't add up to enough to get us to that 8.5. When we do this traditional projection method, we've done it for every FBS team since 2021. We've had a 60.4% winning percentage. We were 55.6 last year. Good numbers, but still room for improvement. So we're trying something new in addition to that traditional method. We are grading, officially we're under that 8.5. But if I were to try to give us a little bit different look at it, give a bonus for every matchup in which a team is favored and a penalty in which they're an underdog, add 10% of a win in those cases. Louisville favored in 9, underdog in 3. It gives us a +6. So add 0.6 to that win total. That gets us very, very close to the odds makers, to the market. So that +6 would be 7.49 or 8.49. So right there at 8.5. So don't see much difference in our projection compared to the odds makers in the market. But this Louisville team is going to have to win some coin flips in order to get back to the ACC Championship. It absolutely could. I think the Cards are quite talented, as we saw 28th in overall roster strength. Those are our individual player ratings built up into position and unit ratings, which we then build into offense and defensive roster strength, and then overall roster strength. This Louisville team is talented, top 30 nationally. The influx of transfers who have gained experience, have gained production, that is how we adjust those player ratings. Louisville grades out, pretty well. So taking that into account, they're not going to be at a significant talent disadvantage very often. Don't have to play our top-ranked team in our power rankings in Florida State. Don't have to play, but they do get Clemson, who is going to be a difficult matchup. Do get Miami. Do get SMU, who we're higher on than most, but think that they're going to be a difficult matchup for a lot of ACC teams this year. Notre Dame in the non-conference is difficult, in addition to Kentucky, which is always a tough opponent at the end of the season as well. But a lot of winnable games on the schedule if Tyler Shuck stays healthy, if Donald Chaney or Turner, whoever ends up emerging at running back, or if they're able to kind of recapture a little bit of that, two back threat like last season, or if the offense changes a little bit, which it sounds like Brohm and his coaching staff really wants to, gets a little bit more vertical in the passing game, gets a little bit more production through the air. With Bell, Lacey, however that wide receiver group comes together, then Louisville absolutely, I think, could win these coin flips, could get past Notre Dame obviously dominated Notre Dame last season, could win close games and coin flips against SMU, Miami, maybe pull off an upset against Clemson. That wouldn't be a shocker, even though it is a second straight road trip and a difficult one to play in Death Valley there. But the way our numbers shake out, just a few too many coin flips that we're not quite, fully able to get there numbers wise. And also personally, there is a little bit of a concern that maybe everything doesn't gel quite as quickly or quite as well as it did last season with so many new, incoming transfers. It's difficult year after year to have that continuity. It's not maybe as big a deal now in college football as it was in the past, but I think just, my opinion, which doesn't factor into these numbers at all, but my opinion and perhaps some of the ones who had a similar thinking when putting together their rankings, like we were talking about, Mark Schlabach, Andy Staples, probably thinking along similar lines of, man, it's difficult to completely rebuild your offense every year, and also going to have to rely on some of those key players to do things we haven't seen much in a while. Tyler Shuck stay fully healthy. Don Chaney step up and be a top running back potentially. Colin Lacey moving up from the group of five into a power four level at wide receiver. That's a little tougher of a transition than it is for some other teams. You're relying on, maybe somebody to anchor your defensive line who is playing in the Ivy League last season against, players who were definitely going pro in something other than football more often than not. Secondary that still has some questions, even though there's a lot of experience and a lot of new players coming in to add depth. Things could maybe not all line up, and you see Louisville falling short in a lot of these games where we expect them to really compete. And then maybe just the tough stretch, the grind of that middle portion of the season. Georgia Tech is a team that I think is going to potentially be one of the better offenses in the ACC, playing the Yellow Jackets and Notre Dame and SMU at Virginia, not the toughest matchup, but not the easiest. Miami, at Boston College, at Clemson, an off week, at Stanford. It doesn't set up super well. That's a lot of travel in the middle of the season. That's a lot of your tougher opponents in the middle of the season. How will those hits add up? We'll just have to see how it all shakes out. But our numbers are high on Louisville, in the grand scheme of things, 17th nationally. But the way the schedule sits up and some of the, potential questionable spots where maybe depth isn't quite what you want it to be. Our numbers also expect Louisville to come a little bit short of that regular season win total. So that is going to do it for us today. We will be back on Monday discussing Texas A&M, our number 18 preseason team. We will also be, of course, active on the Campus Canton Discord, where we are putting all those podcast notes, all of our official projections go into a database, and we upload that, give you a look at where we sit on every win total projection compared to DraftKings, which is just by habit what we use to grade our win total projections. Those are in the Campus Canton Discord and the C2C Winning Edge tier, but you do get Discord access at every level, with as little as $2.99 per month if you were to sign up at campuscanton.com. But if you want access to these team profiles, returning production, those podcast notes, everything that we've got to offer, maybe consider an all 22 tier membership or a C2C Winning Edge tier membership, and then go out and get the CFF guide if you haven't already, or if you're not an annual NIL member. So again, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for giving us a like on this video. Thank you to subscribing to the Campus Canton YouTube channel. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a wonderful weekend and take care.